0-0. I'm getting really good at that. Okay, welcome everyone to a special, awesome ho edition of Get Energized.
Oh yeah.
Well, we have a lot of fun today. I guess Darko also had a really nice hat earlier, and he had lights in his beard, so I'm much more impressed by his getup. But we still have the sweatpants.
At least you got the hat still.
Yeah, the hat it barely fits. I think it's a child size, and I have a giant head to begin with, but it's weighed down and held this way. But since we're doing a special ho edition, right? Do you want to guess what the energy drink is?
Oh, so I guessed eggnog before, and you told me no. That's something that puts you to sleep and that keeps you up.
Yeah.
You were just out. I would say one of those mint Starbucks like latte coffee things.
You would be wrong. Also, yeah, don't worry about alcohol. You guys are super. But I did this for you because you're Mr. Red Bull, and because it's like a holiday edition. It's the winter edition Red Bull. Fig apple. There you go. But so you got a Red Bull drink. Even if you're not having it right now, we have one on here. So I figured that was the right thing to do. Give a plug on that. But today is really fun though, because we were trying to think of, Dan and I were talking about Santa Claus and everything that would happen, right?
Yeah.
And how cool his magic is. And I was saying, well, at scale, there's a lot to do if you're Santa. You got to travel, the whole time, right around 12 o'clock, drop down a bunch of chimneys, do all this stuff. That's really cool. And I wish I could do that. And I thought, what is somewhat comparable in the AWS cloud to handle that kind of scale? And that's what, it's not one of the pillars of the well-architected framework yet, but a little Santa magic might work its way in. But so the best we'll have to do for now is talk about CloudFront functions at scale. And I think this is cool because most people don't deal with CloudFront functions. There's from talking to customers and others, it's typically if they're, in some media services, that kind of thing, to really handle that scale. But it's really cool. So I want to get started on it. And let me get the screen up because it's the type of thing that a lot of people often won't think of, but they can absolutely benefit from immediately. So let's get the screen. Little Christmas magic. Hey, okay. All right. So
there we go.
Looks clear even, right? What a treat. I didn't expect that. So I wanted to bring this up because why CloudFront? So why CloudFront? So this is if you're familiar with CloudFront, which is a CDN, content delivery network. So we can take advantage of a bunch of edge node devices in the AWS backbone and have a bunch of stuff out distributed at that. So for faster responses. And one of the things that when people think of the computational aspects of this programming you might handle at Lambda at Edge comes up, right? And so you can see a lot of people think of writing Node.js or Python or stuff like this, right? There's also a slightly different, well, you don't want to see that attack bar there, slightly different approach, which is CloudFront functions. And these can run on CloudFront as well. Different purposes, right? This is actually, you have to find this page in the documentation, but it's really, really good because it shows you the differences of the use cases you have here. And a lot of the times, there's a lot of auth examples and stuff like this to see Lambda Edge running. But when you think about CloudFront, you might say, what is the function purpose? Really, if you look at this, if you're completely focused, CloudFront functions, it's ECMAScript, like it's JavaScript, and you're dealing with really lean movement across the network. So Lambda Edge, you're pulling in, other, SDKs or libraries or things you're referencing. You're not
optimization.
It's not Python. It's not Node. It is JavaScript. In the past, I've used Llama to resolve to index. Would that be better use case or CloudFront function is great for redirect. So that's actually one of the examples here, and why I would say that's a really good thing to look at. Excellent point to bring up. I'll scroll to that in a minute, but there is a free tier in CloudFront, which doesn't exist in Lambda Edge. And look, Lambda Edge is really cost effective for a lot of use cases here, but CloudFront functions, there's a free tier even. So if you can hit that, that's all the better, right? That's something to be considered of. But when I talk about a little Santa magic and the pace that we're at, how about 10 million requests per second or more? That's not even the cap, or more. So when you're thinking of that, and Lambda at scale, 10,000 is still extremely impressive per region out of these here. But when you're talking 10 million, you're talking about incredibly fast optimize flows. And again, and this is just with some JavaScript. So it's going to be a smaller use case. You're executing this incredibly quickly with very small memory, right? Very small size of your function code, 10 kilobytes here, but sub-millisecond duration of running, because it's something you just really want to hit and run through here. So, asking about a redirect and index is a really good question. Redirects that's an excellent use case for CloudFront functions, because you can just mess with that very quickly when a request comes in, change it, and go ahead and move with that here. The other ones today, I'll show you just some header manipulation, just to give you ideas of what's available with that. Because even just on header manipulation, you can do a lot of different workflow cases there, right? And then, yeah, so cache key normalization is another item that comes up, and then request authorization. But today, for fun, we're just going to talk about how Santa would respond through AWS so quickly.
Yeah.
Basically.
Speed,
right? Speed at scale of what we have
yes.
here. So those are the big takeaways, really important stuff when you consider how powerful that is. And another distinction here, when you look at, viewer and origin requests, we're just talking about viewer requests and responses now in this particular case. But this is what you get in an event to CloudFront. You have contexts, you have viewers, request responses. We're just going to deal with request responses here. But looking through this, you can get all of your details in documentation around the version fields and what you're going to deal with and anything related that you might pull up. But again, today, just headers for ours. There's even some stuff I want to call out before I go into the demo. But, if the page loads here. Hello. So really cool, and what I'll show you here is when a request comes in, if you look at CloudFront itself, CloudFront applies a bunch of headers that you can take advantage of and use in a workflow, which we're going to do today, right? But this is an example of that occurring. You could go ahead and pull these Android desktop viewers apps. All this stuff gets applied by CloudFront, and if you choose to include that or process data based on these headers, you can do that. You can probably see where this is going and why it's really cool, right? Let me really quickly pull up.
Yeah, show a header.
Yeah, well, it timed out on me here, so while we're doing that, I'll pull those up here and talk. I don't know if there's any questions immediately. If not, it's okay. But it's just a really good example of seeing how much. Come here. There we go. That's our CloudFront that's blocked right now. So what we're going to start with in this particular case is actually looking at handling a request that comes in and giving a response. So actually taking that request object and returning a response from a function, basically instantaneously. So before I show you that live, I want to have this queued up to go. And it's loading. Okay, cool. So when we go live and look right now, you're seeing a white page, even though I have a static S3 hosted behind this, right? It's through CloudFront, and it's going to this S3 page here, but it's not rendering the page because we're actually taking a request that comes in and giving a response back. So when we pull this over here, we look at these functions. We're inside of CloudFront now, right? We just go to functions. We have a ho, okay? And what ho is doing right now, we'll change it and redeploy quickly to show you, but we're taking a request object. We'll mess with the request after this here. But the important part is, so we're taking a header because remember, CloudFront will apply stuff. It's applying this CloudFront viewer country property and saying, if you're in the US, we're going to append Merry Christmas. If you're in Mexico, Feliz Navidad. If you're in France, I can never pronounce it correctly. What is it, Dan?
Oh, Joyeux Noël.
Okay, it's much more.
What's it in Quebec?
An A or something at the end of it, I think is something like that.
Joyeux Noël A.
Yeah, there you go. That's about right. But so it's taking this, and we're going to append and do some manipulation of the payload, or in this case, headers, based on that, right? And then we're literally going to take a response, an actual service response, and direct a result here. So preventing any processing, maybe you didn't want to, you want to explain the pages down quickly, you want to redirect people, say not authorized is a great place to handle it fast and cheap. In this particular case, Santa's wishing, Merry Christmas to everybody. So this is out live, and if we pull up our website, I got it up here in Chrome, you'll notice we can redirect and we'll get our index. We get 200. And the greeting is ho, 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 Merry Christmas, because it's not just ho, ho, ho. It's because we're taking that header and we're using that information to give a different value and return it back and actually send a response at 200, comes back, done with new information. Really cool. It's like an interception. And right, we're talking about 10 million per second. I think Santa's okay getting these out the door if you were to use something like this, right? now another approach. So we're going to switch to requests. Actually, no, let me not comment that. We're gonna change. We're gonna say, is that you, Santa Claus? Right. We're gonna request, and we're gonna go all the way to talking to Santa now, rather than him just kind of making sure he wishes us as he flies along with the reindeer. Could I mess with this code? Yes, but just for speed's sake, we'll leave that there. And what we're doing now is taking that request and we're adding this header. And because we're returning the request rather than returning a response, we're simply modifying the header on the request and go into the backend. So in this particular case, you can test this and look even. Let's just test our viewer request. And you'll see, by the way, this is a great point to put out. You can test all this in CloudFront. You don't have to go anywhere else. Your function that's here, testing and exact responses you hear, if you want to manipulate it, do so within CloudFront. Super efficient.
I like very quick to like see if anything's gone wrong or not.
Exactly. I like to know quickly because stuff goes wrong. I never write my code correctly at first, right? But here's the value of a greeting of a header that we applied. It says, that you, Santa Claus, right? So let me make sure I publish this quickly. So now we're publishing it. What does publishing it do? It makes that function available to distributions. And what's really cool, it doesn't have to be tied to just one CloudFront distribution, right? So if you had functions that were usable, maybe a company policy, there's a lot that you can do to work through this here. Well, limitations. So limitations, one of the big things, and I'll pull up a link at the end for you. Good question, but you're talking pure ECMAScript here, right? So there's not a lot of, there's no bells, whistles, ways to catch and protect your, you're going to have just the pure lean ECMAScript, and you have to work within those confines for really fast execution because these aren't made to run, right? It'll fail if it's taking time to run. And let's check here just to bring this up while we're talking about that. I've pushed this out and published it, right? Inside of the distribution or in the functions itself. So it says updating, right? So immediately from clicking this, we're now proliferating across to the CloudFront distribution. But, bring this up in terms of limitations here. You have a lot of power in CloudFront to change behaviors, right? And how all of this is handled. So if we can just go into the behavior here, I have a test bucket I'm using. I'm putting it to HTTPS only. I'm using get and head. You change the cache policies and everything related here. So for mine, we're passing that new header along from CloudFront, right? So I made a policy that says Santa's going to greet you in your local language. We saw that working, right? And I'm applying that to my requests and responses down here. This is where you define it. So, if you hit a limitation with the JavaScript runtime, like I mentioned, this is the same point you configure the Lambda edge if you need to alter that or change it differently, right? You have the power to mix and match these even within your CloudFront distribution of what you're attempting to do in those cases. So when in doubt, those 4 use cases around cache management or headers, redirects, that kind of stuff, if it makes sense, it sounds really little. It sounds like something you'd take immediately just to change that behavior. It's a great use case for that. That's generally the way to think of it. So now this has been running for a minute. Let's pull back up our test screen where I zoomed in so you can see the actual headers. We should hit Santa's site. And we did. And look at that. How cool. So where do we begin on this? First off, this is the best Twitch show ever. Thank you, Santa. All viewers, 110% on the nice list. He's even giving you a PogChamp face. Look at that. Is pretty sweet. That's how excited he is. PogChamps. You love to see it. Okay. So what happened is the header, because this time we just modified the request, went all the way through to our response function. And I'll show you that in 1 second after it. But if we come along and we look, we got our 200, everything worked great. We're hitting our page and look, greeting now is ho, ho, ho. You've been very good this year. And I think that's all you want to hear from Santa, right? So this is good stuff. Why do we see this? So what changed? Well, I didn't intercept and give a response now. I let the request pass all the way through. Santa approved. That's what matters. Yes. We'll move this over. And now we'll go back to the CloudFront and show you why did we see ho, 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 you've all been very good this year. Well, there's another function, and that function is ho, 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 return. And return is sitting out here. And if we look at it, dead simple again, right? The really nice thing is basic ECMAScript. It's running really fast and doing something. And in this case, what are we doing? We're just manipulating headers on the return, right? And so in this case, Santa is letting you know when you hit the website, you're hanging out with us here on Twitch. You've been good. Good job. I think you're going to get a lot of presents this year, okay? And that header gets added to it and returned back, and it just runs at scale because it's deployed. And if we ever want to modify this, again, the functions you can attach them to any distribution you want. You can have multiples here, but in our particular distribution and our behavior that we have set up, I have said that that function is the viewer response. So request comes in the viewer, we add a header now, right? It passes all the way through. The S3 page renders, you see everything comes back here. On the way back to the viewer that we come in here, we're stopping for a moment. We're taking that function, return, to have Santa add the header on at scale, and it comes back. And it's really that simple. But, regarding the limitations, I should have a page up that I can show you. What, headers, so it's really cool. We can be almost as fast as Santa. It's not magic. It's not that cool. But what else would you do in these particular cases? Well, here's a really nice example of using CloudFront and considering the functions to handle security aspects or events that you're returning back here. So here's headers that you might apply back automatically every time on a request coming through here. So you could see why quickly, if you were to do header manipulation or something like this here, you're very quickly going to end up wanting to allocate that back and put it into maybe a standard that your company follows or some sort of approach in that place, right? There's a lot you can do. But I think, that's probably, given you asked the question, let me just drop that in here if you want to take a look. However, regarding, I wouldn't so much say limitations, I would say the design of the feature here. This page was the one, if you missed it in the beginning, I'm not sure.
That's a fantastic page.
You might have seen it. This is the page you really want, right? If you really want to understand the differences, what we just did and why we did it this way, it's a couple things to take away here, right? It was, as by design of functions, kind of one of the 4 use cases here, which is header manipulation. You can see that, right? Anything else within that space, like returning security that you're adding to every single call, also doable, right? That's a good place to do it. And again, why is that good? Sub-millisecond function duration. Like this just runs. Oh, okay, no file system access. So I'm guessing yes, exactly. Yep. So no, you're not adding in any of these other libraries you might use. So that's what a great case for Lambda Edge when that happens. That's exactly right. So if you have a library node that you're using to do something else, if you file structure or something change around here, different use case. The function gives you the advantage of being really, really quick at a crazy scale, 10 million per second. Running like that, ideally hitting the free tier, right? Which is all the better. I'm a big believer, if you can get it for free, do it for free. That's the case on the CloudFront here. And I think when you consider that, you're not doing network access, you're not changing file structures, you're not even the request body modification here, right? You're going to look at stuff like Lambda Edge there, and you might have a combination of these that you account for in your distribution. You can have different cases, you can have different ways those paths are handled. But in a case like this, where Santa's got to say Merry Christmas really quickly in the right language and return some info, this is a perfect use case for that. Yeah. So a lot of the times, I have seen a lot of people who can benefit from this who just don't even know it exists or even think out there, right? You'll only think of like Lambda Edge as being that processing layer that you can take advantage of, and it's just not the case. Yeah, I mean, you save a few cents, adds up, right? That's a few cents to toy around with another service if I want it later, right? Even in my personal account, that's the way I would view that, right? So yeah, take advantage of free tier. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. Take advantage that it's really easy to build and test in. Like, so I just want to test as I go in that UI. I'm not leaving a page. I'm tinkering and looking around there, right? All that very friendly, easy way to look at this at scale. And I think that's one of the cool things to call out and why I thought it would be fun. Again, it's not as cool as Magic. It's still pretty cool though. Oh, are there APIs for CloudFront functions? So no, because it's going to be the pure ECMAScript compliancy. So you'll have to look at this, but there is actually, if you're curious about integration on that, I don't have it pulled up. There's a different article I can show you where there's some cool things that people work with in terms of redirects to get back to API endpoints, that kind of work if you want to put it into a workflow. But in terms of like embedding, not so much. I wonder what page would this be off? There's some workflow stuff out there. I'll take a look afterwards, and maybe we'll post that to a Twitter response we have out here, some of our postings. But that's a good question. But yeah, really look at the workflow perspective from that. Manage functions through the agent. Okay. So functions, I don't believe I've ever dealt with that. because they're really quick inside of here. Where would they be? I don't have the answer to that. I can look that up for you, to be honest.
Good question.
It's a really good question. CDK, I want to say yes, but not on CLI. I have to double check on this here. But in most cases, they're written in the console where you write it there because it's the test function and deploy, and you then associate it with. But I want to say CDK is the one that has that. That's a good question. Good question. Even so, I would probably say in general, when you're testing and working through that here, it's a little easier to do quick edits and modifications in the console where that test screen is embedded with it, so you can see how those work out. Yeah, CDK supported. That's what I thought. I don't think the CLI, unfortunately, but CDK is. And I like that test screen personally. I think that's a nice area to work with in there, even if you have your CDK open and you're running that locally. But yeah, the CDK is also a great tool, just in general. That's something we think we might show at a later point here, one of the demos with one of the guests that we're going to have on, which actually is a good segue, Dan. I mean, so we're at the end of the year now, right?
Yes.
I know we're getting a bunch of presents, and the viewers are getting a bunch of presents too, because it said so, right? Santa likes us. But next year, I mean, what are we thinking for next year? This is it for 2022.
Oh yeah. So we've taken into account all the shows that we've done and what the viewers have given us in feedback. And we have a good amount of guests that are lined up. So we're going to go with many different types of energy companies. And we're also going to go into a lot of these labs. We felt like the workshops have really done a lot to get viewership, and people are very interested in those. So we're going to try to do more of those types of things going on in the future here.
Yeah, we got really good feedback on that, which is fun. And so we might even have some that are multi-episode just to get through that example and ideally let you build along with us. So we'll see where that goes and what we have planned, but some pretty cool stuff. And yes, that's a good comment. It is great for testing and prototyping. Like, it really is. The console space is really nice to live in for that. But that's the show. We want to have everybody really pleasant holiday season, get into 2023. We'll be back in the beginning of the year, second and fourth Thursday, usually in general too. So not the first week, but we'll be coming back after that. I think Darko's coming back before us here if you stuck around from the last show. As usual, that's a fantastic show. So you'll ideally at some point get to segue into us, but not the first time. You'll have to wait, unfortunately. But you know, anticipation's fun, right? You have a bunch of Christmas presents to play with. That what it said here? Santa's dropping them off. So I think that's it. I mean, it's a lot of fun. We enjoy doing this as usual. We didn't put a survey together here like some of the others have, but we've been messaged directly and keep doing that. You know, our handles are on screen here. If there's anything else you want to reach out to, let us know. Put it in chat. All this is always welcome. This is done because we like interacting with chat. We like teaching others, and you learned a thing. That's all I want. That's what
we're here for.
All we're here for. It's just great. That's all we want to see. You learned a thing. Like, that's big success, right? All worth it then. So with that, Dan, should we sign off and tell everybody to enjoy the rest of the year? He has.
I will hit a shot next year. How about that?
2023 resolution. Actually, get the basket in the tiny. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. I can't even speak right now. I honestly thought you'd have it that time. End of the year.
It was close.
I thought that was it. Painful. All right. Everyone, have a good remainder of 2022. We'll see you in 2023. Take care.
Take care, everyone.